Welcome everyone to this long-term plan open briefing. Welcome to council staff, elected members. Got a few community board members here, welcome. And to Cheryl and Gavin who are online, and I'll pass over to Mark.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon, everybody. So, look, we've got a session today that runs from now until 5 p.m, but we will just gauge the room because we've got quite a lot to get through. So we do have Cheryl, Gavin online, and we've got Jing at the back. We've got our GMs on the side as well. So hopefully, between all of us, we've got Chris in the front. So hopefully, and Darren. So hopefully, we can answer all your questions. It is a bit of a it is quite a big session today. So we'll get cracking. We'll get through it. So what we're going to, we're just waiting for the presentation that's coming up. Does that get turned on? Oh, yeah. Okay. So as before, please do ask questions when you need to. If we can stay on the slides that we're on, would be our preference. But we are here to obviously present and to answer your questions. So we're going to what we're going to discuss today. We're going to just have a quick fire, rapid stop on performance measures. As promised, we're going to come back with staff comments and recommendations regards the council law and community board initiative. So we'll go through that line by line. There were also, as we've been progressing on our journey with the long-term plan, some councillors have actually raised some other queries. So we're reporting those back to you with comments and recommendations. We are going to do a very, very brief financial update. We will show you the 10-year view currently, where we're at. There's still work to be done in that space. Plus, we're going to talk about a couple of other issues on the finances. Then we're going to have a talk about, potential consultation topics. We're sort of at that point in our journey now where we need to sort of try and clarify and agree what we want to consult on, if possible. Then, if there's time, we'll do the DC policy update. So if we are getting close to 5, or there's a sense that we want to stop for the day, we can easily transfer the DC policy conversation over to the 12th of December. And then just what we always do, as this is a public document, we have key point takeouts of today's conversation, and we let you know what's coming up. So we've got 2 more sessions. We've got the 12th and we've got the 14th of December. So performance measures, I'm going to hand over to Chris for this.
Kia ora. And I would like to say, I have circulated around some documents and loaded up to LG Hub for your information, so it's background information. Today, we're really just doing a bit of a check-in and talking about next steps, and have one thing that we really wanted to get. I think we're talking about it being the affirmative nod that we're heading in the right direction. So, we'll just note, we have had a couple of discussions on the LTP performance measures. You have had a bit of a deep dive and had a look at them, given us feedback. After our last public meeting, we agreed we'd have a councillor subgroup come together, and for completeness, that included feedback from the Deputy Mayor, from Councillor Coe, from Liz and from Jocelyn. So we're just summarising what came back in terms of ideas that could be further explored. And I'm just reminding you, we were looking at our level of service measures, we were looking at our impact measures. Overall, through that sort of subgroup conversation, we got a broad endorsement of the suite of measures, with some clarifications of some measures of the wording, and you'll see that in the documents that we've loaded into LG Hub. And then there was 2 measures that were proposed to be introduced, and there was 4 replacement measures proposed. We are not intending to work through that in detail today because we still need to clarify the doability of some of those changes. So there's no point in us going through and having a huge conversation when we're going to say to you, we can't actually do it. So it'll be off the table. So we will be coming back to close the loop, but for completeness, we're just letting you know that happened and feeling like we're in quite a good place in terms of where we've landed. So today, what we wanted to talk about was we're getting into the territory of performance level targets and the targets for our level of service measures and desired levels of change for our impact measures. So we had previously said to you that we are wanting your nod of approval that we are using a guiding principle for setting our targets for the LTP 2024, and that is that we're maintaining 2023-24 levels of service. And that is because you have said to us that we're going for minimising the implications for rates increase. And at the time we were talking about 12% and the fact that that is maintained level of service. So we have been absorbing some things, but making sure that we can keep doing what we do now. So Darren, as Chief Executive, is now, with your agreement, working with us to set that into play, and that will come back next year so that you can see that. There's one exception, though, I want to raise, which is the bottom sort of bullet point, and that was to do with transport service levels reducing as extra funding of 1.6 million, and that was for the State Highway 1 revocation. The additional 14 Ks of network and responding network reducing to 610 K. So that's 990 Ks less than we were expecting. So there is an implication of that. So you will see that adjustment and the measures that we come back to you with next year.
Sorry, Chris, just well, yeah, I'm interested to know how $1 million managed to disappear. Waka Kotahi, presumably. But the other one is the so we is settled on maintaining the levels of service, but I'm assuming that that doesn't preclude any new services or any new funding for any new projects. We're not. I presume we're not just shutting the door. Like, I'll give you an example. Was with the Citizens Advice Bureau, for instance, right? So 3-year funding there was going to be about 130,000 or whatever it was. And there seemed to be some general agreement through the committee stages that that would be a good idea. So any of those kind of things, are we saying either that's off the table or it's only on the table subject to finding that same amount of money from somewhere else?
I think what I'm saying is where things have been put on the table, we've been doing our very best to absorb things where we can. We're prioritising some of what we do already to pick up some of the things you're interested in, and that's what you'll hear us coming back with. So that's maintained. But I am going to hand over to Sean because he was pushing his button to respond to the question about the change in Waka Kotahi funding potentially. Sean.
So we did go over this in the previous workshop in terms of the
9th of November.
one of those. Yeah. So that's not just the revocation was one element to that cost increase. The other issues relate to the Infometrics work we did in terms of the overall cost of transport going up. So it's a combination of a whole lot of cost increases, and it is I guess a net reduction in the amount of money that we're going to spend based on what we'd asked for to meet the current levels of service. So if it's costing more to do the same amount of work, if the money doesn't go up, then obviously you can't match that same amount of work. So it's spread across, we have 300 kilometres of roading network. So there's a couple of measures there. There's one around smoothness and there's another one around footpaths that we would just need to reduce those slightly on the basis that we won't have as much funding.
Oh, yep.
So through you, Your Worship. Just to add to one of your questions. So in terms of the reason why it was cut by 990. So any cost neutral increases in levels of service are absolutely on the table, as long as they're cost neutral. And in terms of the beginning, we had a look at our budgets. Any cost neutral increases were in, and what group managers and activity managers actually identified as the need for an additional $5 million of OPEX. And so one of the ways we landed at 12% was our chief executive drew a line through the 5 million and said you have 2. And group managers were tasked how best to prioritise the 2 million. And one of the casualties was some funding on transport.
That's an important clarification.
Oh, yes, yes, thank you. 2 questions I have, actually, thank you. Well, actually 3. Is this a public, is this,
It is.
okay, right, good, thank you. My first question relates to the first bullet point. So it says maintaining the 23-24 levels of service. Is that for the duration of this long-term plan or a shorter time frame?
That's for the duration of the long-term plan.
Okay, thank you. My second question relates to the last bullet point, and what time frame is that reduction of 990k refer to, please?
So that particular reduction is in year 1, so that's the 24-25 financial year.
Are there any, so beyond that, what happens then?
Yeah, so most of our workshops have actually all been on year 1. So I mean that was the critical sort of get out of the starting blocks. Let's focus on year 1. Later on in the presentation, we will be showing you what it looks like over the next 10 years. So part of the LTP, we've obviously got to model our numbers for 10 years. We're still trying to finalise year 1 with yourselves, because there's quite a few knock-on effects from years 2 to 10. But pretty much what we're doing in year 1 does flow through.
Okay, so my other question is in relation to that year 1 in terms of the state highway revocation. So that's actually the naming part of it, and which part of the road do the works apply to?
Sean already had his light on.
Yeah, just on that, the year 2. So what we've done, what we've done in the past is actually tried to lift that increase in cost, stagger it over 3 years rather than apply it all in year 1. So we're not applying it in year 1, but there is a slight increase in years 2 and 3 to try and bring it up to that level. But again, in the context of the rates numbers for those years as well, which Mark just mentioned, and it's the road in its entirety. So there are 6 bridges, the 14 kilometres of road, and again, it doesn't. That money is not all related to maintenance on the old highway. So it is the entire transport network, but with an element of it that relates to the old state highway.
Good. Next slide.
So that actually, I'm still unsure of the answer. Sorry, because so the section from Peka Peka North is not part of the revocation process in this in the next year. So that means it must be
Just checking around the table, who feels like they need more information around this revocation stuff? Other people? In that case, Jocelyn, can you take this offline and Sean will fill you in? Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Ask that question. I think you're actually belittling me, if I may say so.
We're trying to get through a lot of information here by 5 o'clock, and we're delving into a bit of detail here. And I just checked with the rest of the table, and that's not a level of detail that other people feel like they need right now, which is why I'm suggesting a one-on-one conversation. Okay, carry on.
Thank you. I'm just going to check in on bullet point 2 on your screen. So we have talked before about the resident opinion survey results. And we did, and I'm just confirming, explain that we have been putting what we're calling more objective measures into the long-term plan. So the things that we can say to you, this is what we're going to do, and drive towards achieving it. And you can ask us if we don't, why, what's happened. We're still going to use the resident opinion survey. It is going to be in other reporting that we come back to you on, but it will not be in the long-term plan. So I'm just confirming that point. Lastly, and at point 3, I'm just confirming we did send around the performance level and desired direction of change in a document which is on LG Hub. And now that's with you as well. You can have a look at it. If you've got any feedback or queries on that, which is really just implementing the point 1 I talked about with the guiding principle of maintaining service levels, we're asking that you can come back offline. So you can come back to me. We will come back to everybody on any questions that we have. But our proposition is that we're starting to get to the point where we've got enough to start talking to audit in the new year, and we'll be starting to test those. If we get any feedback on them, we'll be coming back to you, and then we will bring it back as part of the suite where we start to get you to approve things. So we've got to the pointy end of that process, I guess, but that was all I needed to say today on performance measures.
Look, I just want to thank you, Chris, and the rest of the team for taking the time to work through this, and the group of councillors too, Councillors Kirby, Cohen, Pravanov, who took the time to dig into this and make sure that it's something that they feel we're all comfortable with. So thanks for that.
Thank you. And to Mark too. Mark was part of that too.
Yes. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you, Your Worship. So that's one section done, 7 to go. So, right, so as you know, we've had a number of presentations, and we've been putting up on the screen the council law and community board initiatives, and we've been saying that we're working through that, and we'll bring recommendations back to the table. So the next couple of slides, or there's quite a few slides actually, we'll be going through it line by line. What we're presenting to you is our comments and our feedbacks and our recommendations, but it's entirely your decision as to how we treat that. So first of all, it's our favourite slide, but it looks a little bit different. So this is the initiatives that the council has put up. What had majority support, which didn't have majority support, which was endorsed, and which was sort of a good idea. So the way in which we've actually tackled this is we've only looked at the items where the council laws supported in the majority. So those are all highlighted in red. So the next few slides will go through the red items line by line, and we'll discuss that with you, what the comments are and what the recommendations are. So if you will, that's kind of the roadmap for the next few slides.
Can I just ask a very quick question?
Yes.
Work Ready Kapiti and Zeal, that I would put under youth development, say, where do they sit in terms of allocation for funding for LTP?
New initiatives, right?
I'm just gonna pick up on what we did when we workshopped through these, and we agreed that it was those majority initiatives that we would do work on. Anything else, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Chris, anything that didn't make that threshold was pushed into Vision Kapiti for the outer years. So that's what I've held SLT to work on, because we started working up every single thing that you'd discussed at your workshops. And I brought us back to that tenet that it was the majority stuff that we all voted on that we would work up for consideration for this long-term plan. If it didn't meet that threshold, then it was shifted to the Vision Kapiti work.
Can I? Yeah. I just feel that process that we went through that day was very rushed, and it was unannounced. So we turned up here and got suddenly asked to brainstorm a whole lot of stuff, which we then went round and randomly kind of ticked. And I don't think, well, I certainly don't feel as though we've had time to reflect on the output of that session to just double check what our priorities are. And we've also had other, meetings and so on since then. I would be really, because I know that Work Ready Kapiti came and spoke to us about how they will want to get an extra 300k funding. Maybe that's unrealistic. Zeal, have put forward a case for us to continue to support them. I just want to make sure that because of a rushed process, that we're not overlooking some of those things which I consider to be really important, and maybe we need to just double check in a round table session, you know, how important are those things for us as elected members to be included, whether they should be included in the LTP or not.
I'm going to go to Chris.
Thank you. I will start with Darren's initial question. That's my understanding of what we talked about. And I just do want to recap that in advance of those sessions, 3 weeks or so in advance, we did send an email out to councillors first and then community boards advising them that those sessions were happening and what we'd be doing. I do understand that determining priorities is a really important thing and meaningful, so I'm not discounting that point at all. I do want to say though about Work Ready Capity, that is in the scope of the ED Economic Development work programme. So we have Work Ready Capity in there, and we have some work underway through the Mayor's Task Force and other things to support that. Youth development budget specifically, I know that there is work in our work programme around things like youth development. Some of what we looked at was whether it was new or as things that are underway and whether we could be incorporating them as well. So some of the majority things, even there, we are incorporating into what we're doing. It may not require additional budget in some situations. So I did just want to note that. I'm not sure if that's helpful, but just to close that loop as well.
So we've had this slide in 2 previous workshops. When we now have one more workshop before the end of the year, I think we kind of need to progress with what we've got. As you'll see, just let us go through it too, because what you'll see is that a lot of the things that we're suggesting, that a lot of them fit within existing budgets or are going to happen anyway. And both of those things that you just identified fall into those categories. So,
That's what I'm unclear on.
yeah. So,
What's in them?
Hara?
Just in reference to the Zeal budget, that's currently in people and partnerships. So that's in my budget at the moment. If that's what you were asking, where it was sitting. Well, that'll be coming to a council meeting dealt with outside of the LTP process.
Cool. So, potentially, if anybody has any other things that they think have slipped through the gaps through this process, which, I mean, we had that one workshop where we talked about things, but then we had another slide, we've had this slide twice since. We've had 2 opportunities to identify things that we might think aren't there. I'm starting to think like that opportunity is now past, actually, to be quite blunt about it. We have a long-term plan that we've got to get through. We've got 1 more working week this year, and then next year we'll be right into the thick of it, finalising the, when are we finalising the consultation document, remind me?
In February.
Yeah, we'll only just be back. So, yeah. It's not that things can't, if we really feel like we've got the whole thing dreadfully wrong, we can do a long-term plan amendment the following year. You know, it is possible. Horowhenua did one last year. So, I mean, we don't really want to be in that position. But unless there's something really major that you think like we've got terribly wrong, then I think we really need to press on with what we've got. Shelley?
I've just got a clarification around the first initiative, and I should have raised it before. I think ecotourism and resilience are two different things, and all we've got there, which looks a little bit silly, is building the multi-purpose tiny glamping huts, when really I think ecotourism was more around building the CWB.
So can we get through these?
Yeah.
Actually, I'd like to get through these slides before I take any more questions, because we're going to go into a bit more detail as we go along. So let's not wait till we get to the end of the slides, but let's wait until we get to the more detailed slides and talk to them as we go through line by line. Is that okay, Mark?
Yes.
Yep. So let's keep going for now. Sorry, I'm not shutting anybody down or anything.
So thank you, Your Worship. So I know you have the slides in front of you, and we will go through it nice and slowly, line by line. So the first priority is social needs assessment. So the position is it's currently underway.
We don't have that slide in front of us. Sorry, Mark.
Oh, it's on LG Hub.
So are we going to have
Oh,
that up here?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, I'm not wanting a hard copy or anything. No.
So currently a social needs assessment is underway, and it's in the current annual plan, and it is being done by Chris and her team. And in terms of the recommendations, is that future funding to address that assessment is currently included in your draft LTP. I think.
Does somebody have a question about that one in particular? We'll take them one by one. Nigel?
Oh,
Glenn first.
oh, yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
So we're on the social needs assessment. We'll talk about them one by
Yeah,
one.
and I was just a comment more than a question in respect to, like, I mean, this was all done when we were looking at 12% with a hopefulness of 8.9, and now we're looking at 17%. So I think that sort of changes. Does that not change some of this? Not, I'm saying we should go back to scratch and start all over again, but it sort of changes the mindset, doesn't it? I think.
Okay, I think that's a fair comment, and we'll park that for now. At the moment, I'd like us to carry on with what we've decided to include, because we haven't even reached a decision about what to do about that extra potential rates rise yet. So let's just see how we go. But good point. Can we take a note of it? Nigel?
Yeah, no, I was just going to, just to the point that Liz was raising, I don't really litigate that, is just that when we go through these processes that we've gone through, our internal consultation, if you like, around the LTP, what will happen in that situation is stuff will get missed. It will get missed here, like in terms of it won't be represented. So take that the Work Ready Kapiti thing was an example. Now it might be somewhere else, but we might not necessarily know that. So I just think, I don't think anyone's suggesting that we would go back and relitigate all this stuff, because I mean, I'm not even going to mention the fact that casino's not in there, but but those things about where there are exceptional items, or say a councillor has a real thing about something, then perhaps we try our best to accommodate that if we can. I don't think there's going to be a whole bunch of them, but there will be some. And rather than just sort of saying, well, that door's bolted and the horse is gone, if we can just keep a little bit of an open mind about some of those things, because some of those processes were interesting. I mean, I remember cajoling people to go and put a yellow sticker on the casino, right? And it ended up with about 5, 3 of which were Shelley's. But you know, that process itself, it wasn't entirely scientific. And given that we're going to be putting some fairly big money behind some of these things, and again, I'm not saying we unpick them, but I think if a councillor's got a particular issue around something, that we perhaps try and accommodate that. That's all.
All I'm saying is it would have to be pretty important to said councillor and to the community in general at this stage. I mean, at some stage we've got to, you know, at some stage you do have to kind of draw the line a little bit, because otherwise we're just going to go round and round in circles. And, you know, there is a time when, you know, that needs to happen. When the long-term plan's in print, you sure can't do that. So it's just about when we decide that time is that. But, I mean, we're still discussing these recommendations. So what I got on my, I'll take that on. And what I've got on my parking lot at the moment is Work Ready Kapiti. I haven't heard anything else. If anybody thinks of any other things, and then we'll have a discussion. Zeal, we've heard is not a LTP discussion. We've heard that from the group manager. So that's why we're not having that discussion here. Bede?
Yeah, one that was on a slide in previous weeks that's disappeared is Te Ara Korowai as a potential funding option, and they have presented as well.
How are we dealing with external requests? Usually we have a separate table around them.
No, it hasn't disappeared. It hasn't disappeared. It's fun. It's number 4 on that slide. It just.
No, indoor sports facility is number 5 on that slide.
Oh no, just community boarding. So, no, if you go to the next slide.
Oh, yep, it's
yeah.
here, Bede.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
cool.
we're not yet on the community board initiatives.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll hold
It's
my
there. Okay, so I can take that off. So all I've got so far is work ready Kapiti. Did that get captured anywhere? Yeah, Chris?
Sorry, I'll clarify my comment from earlier. The Economic Development team is working with Work Ready Kapiti to source funding through a central government process. So we're supporting them through that rather than proposing to put a funding bid through to this LTP. We'll be coming back to you on that and what where we're getting to and what's happening.
Okay, crossing that off.
It
Yeah.
definitely is.
Good to have that clarified. Thank you. Nigel, did you have your... Yes. Jocelyn? Is this about the social needs
Oh,
assessment?
no, I did have a question about that. If we can just go back to that slide, please. So there, it says it's underway. I'm not, can I have a clarification about why it needs to be funded in the following year, please, or even longer?
Hi. So,
Chris?
what?
Chris, maybe you should come back up,
Oh,
actually. Sorry, if you're going to be answering all the questions, you may as well be up here. You don't have to wave at me, and I don't have to look through Rob to see you.
sorry. So I get the idea with the social needs assessment is the first piece we're doing at the moment is to really pull together a picture of the, I'm going to say the social ecosystem and needs that are sitting in our community. We do anticipate that it's likely that more work will come out the end of that because there's going to be some areas that we want to target. And just as I think as we've had some conversations in the health space, sometimes it's not that we're doing work, it's that we're supporting others, facilitating or doing some advocacy or other things. So it's not a huge amount of money we're talking about anticipating for the next year, but it's built into our budget that we can make allowance for supporting that next step. So it's not like we've got 200 or 500,000 sitting there waiting for next steps. It's just in the vicinity of us operationally being able to do that kind of work.
The other thing is that we gave a strategic message to council staff right at the start of this process is we wanted to identify that spending which was a potential investment for the future of the district and for getting external funding. And like the housing needs assessment, the social needs assessment has the potential to unlock funding for us by being able to establish a need in our district for external funding. And it's exactly what we told council staff, the kind of thing we told them that we wanted to achieve through this long-term plan. So it's not just about what you spend, but it's about what you're investing. Nigel?
Yeah, just on that point, I was just wondering where something like that came through Martin's committee, given that's the Social Sustainability Committee. So a lot of this stuff came Martin's committee's been the conduit in terms of from the public through the process. So one of those, and I don't want to be broken record about, but the Citizens Advice Bureau funding. So I'm just not quite sure where that's captured in here, because if it's not a line item, but it's been something that's been recommended through a committee. So where would can we just assume that that's in there, or?
So to me, that wouldn't be a separate line item. It would be part of our social investment package.
Yeah.
And I've asked for an update on that.
Oh.
So hopefully that will come, not hopefully, that will come back for us to consider through that. I don't think it needs to be identified separately at this point, unless we decided we wanted to increase the general pool for social investment. But I think that would come out of the social needs assessment, surely. Councillor Ivanov?
Yeah, so along the similar lines through the Climate and Environment Subcommittee, and this is one of the items that I raised in an email I sent, can't remember, last week sometime, was about a state of the environment assessment, which came through at our subcommittee.
That's coming up, Jocelyn.
Okay then, okay,
Great.
thank you.
Right, so have we finished with the social needs assessment? We'll move on to Raumati Pool upgrade.
So thank you. So just in terms of the Raumati Pool upgrade, so currently at the moment there's some engineering assessments that are underway. Those need to be done first to understand the state of play. I think also a review of the water bar and restaurant. So any real progress on doing any upgrade of any kind to the Raumati Pool is 1 to 2 years away. So at the moment, there is no placeholder in the capital works budget. As you know, we've had to take 33% cut to the CapEx budget. So given that we actually don't know what that upgrade will be, what it'll cost, there is no placeholder in the draft long-term plan. But what we're signalling is that potentially there may be something that council wants to do, and that's why we have annual plans in years 2 and 3 of a long-term plan to actually make some revisions. So the recommendation is that we don't have a placeholder for that in the draft long-term plan, but it could well be an item in the future once we know what it is that you want to do and what it's likely to cost.
Shelley?
I'm really naive here, but does Kāinga Ora pay development contributions when they build in the district? Oh.
No.
Oh, that might be a fund that could go into the Raumati Pool for a facility.
Yeah, government also don't pay rates on their land. It's an ongoing conversation. Bede?
Right, thank you. Just in terms of the pool building, obviously there's stages of work to get it to something amazing that it will one day be. The first stage of that obviously is the earthquake strengthening. Now, is that something that will be done soon? Because obviously there's some real issues around getting that done. Can we at least get that done?
Mike. We need Mike's mic.
Thanks, Bea. So just to be really clear, there's 2 parts to this. The first part is the earthquake strengthening, which is required so that the waterfront bar can continue to operate. That work is happening this financial year, so we'll get that done. What we're talking about here specifically is the stuff that we engage with the board on what happens to the future site that was previously known as the Raumati Pool, right? So to be clear, we're not actually upgrading the pool, it's the building and the community facility that could operate within that building. That's the bit that Mark's talking about. The earthquake strengthening is happening now.
Hang on, wait for the microphone. We're live streaming.
That's good news. Thank you for clarifying that, because obviously, yeah, there's a tenant there that we need to look after. I'm happy to look at alternative types of funding like the PGF that we talked about today, SPV through the EDKB. There's options, so I'm happy to look at flexible options in the future.
Great. And let's move on. Did Cheryl want to say something? I don't have the Zoom laptop, so.
Yeah, can you all hear me? All right.
Yeah, we can hear you, Cheryl.
Oh, good. Hey, listen, I just backing up the truck just a little bit. I can give you a bit of comfort that this isn't the end of the debate and decision making for the long-term plan. When we go into consultation, people put in submissions. Anyone can put in a submission asking for whatever they like. and then we go into a process of hearings and deliberations. So that deliberations process is where you can make tweaks. For instance, the Citizens Advice Bureau, if you wanted to put in funding, it would be a simple matter of passing a resolution to do that. As long as it's nothing significant that we should have consulted on, you still have that opportunity.
That's a really
That's
good
all I wanted to say,
reminder.
just
That's
to-
a very timely and good reminder. Thank you, Cheryl.
Okay.
Otaki Lake improvement.
So this one's a little bit simpler. So council's role is to advocate with regional council to deliver a management plan. The recommendation is there's no funding for this included in the long-term plan because it's actually Greater Wellington Regional Council's responsibility.
Jocelyn.
Yeah, so my question was to the previous comment. So in terms of, I'm just really keen to know, being able to do tweaks to the long-term plan that haven't been consulted on, what figures are we looking at there? And the second part of that too is a comment was made about potentially including something or other in a annual plan. I know that there are thresholds there for changes to the annual plan so that you don't need consultation. So it would be interesting to hear what both those figures are, please.
So just in terms of the council must adopt a significance and engagement policy, and that actually defines whether you need to consult or not. So one of our probably next week or the week after that, we will be taking you through the revised significance and engagement policy. So that's the trigger. So you adopt a long-term plan. The annual plan enables you to make some changes to the long-term plan, but again, you have to go back to your significance and engagement policy. So if you trigger the significance and engagement policy, you have to consult.
So what are those? Just those figures, please. And obviously, for this long-term plan, we are dealing with the current significance plan as well.
Yeah. So it's a whole set of criteria.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's financial thresholds and non-financial thresholds.
Okay.
You could probably look up KCDC significance and engagement policy and find the document if you're interested in further information. So we've got indoor sports facility, ecotourism and resilience first.
Ecotourism and resilience. So there's funding allocated in year one for a business case development, and then so year one's got funding for a business case development, and then that's it. That's what's in the draft long-term plan. Depending on the outcome of that business case, there is a potential to add funding into a subsequent annual plan, or depending on the timing, a subsequent long-term plan.
This was the one that you were interested in, Shelley. So now's the time to make those comments that you were starting on. This was where there were the eco huts and.
Yeah, so it was about revenue. Is this about revenue rather than okay?
Can I? A point I would make around that is that this, in terms of where the catchment for this sort of issue might be. So, for instance, the case has already been made that ecotourism and resilience and the kind of work that the CWB does. CBW?
I think apparently we're coming to the CWB a bit later.
Slightly dyslexic, but the work that they do. So perhaps that's captured under the economic development stuff as well. I'm assuming that it is.
I can just confirm that we're going to be talking about CWB, and there's several elements to that, one of which is economic development.
Yeah.
And we do have a feasibility study that we're going to be undertaking around that zone. And of course, there'll be a connection. These things fit together. And I am going to also make a play to go and recovery, which we've started a conversation on and we'll be continuing to talk about into the new year.
Cool. Indoor sports facility?
Indoors. Yeah. So just so that no one's getting confused. So we've done the social needs, we've done the Raumati pool, we've talked about the Otaki Lake, We've just talked about the ecotourism resilience. We've got the all-of-government multi-purpose facility. These are the new revenue-generating initiatives, the indoor sport and the indoor sports facility. So that's where we're at. So we're just literally targeting the red highlighted majority-supported initiatives. So we're on the indoor sports facility. So feasibility study is currently underway at the moment. This will determine likely costs of doing anything going forward. So we don't know. So we don't know what that feasibility study is going to return. We haven't put any placeholder funding in our capital works program because we've shaved off so much. We've got it down to deliverability. However, the feasibility study, once it's done, there is an opportunity, if the council so wishes, to include it in a subsequent annual plan / LTP.
Kathy?
Just wondering through you, Madam Mayor, how long the feasibility study, is there a timeline on that, Mike? That was all.
Mike?
So it's imminent, councillor. So we're expecting it in the next month or so, the final version.
Fantastic. We wait with bated breath.
Mm.
Thank you. Nigel?
I just note that some of these items that were listed under income generating, if you built the Eiffel Tower and then charged 50 cents to go up the Eiffel Tower, it's going to be income generating, but it's not going to be a net income generator for a long time. So putting something like I'm not pouring cold water on the Ian Castle Sport and Recreation Centre. I hope it goes ahead fully funded by a sponsor, but but I wouldn't see that as something that's income generating as such. It's going to, no. Yeah, I thought it was.
So these aren't just income generating ones. These are all of the ones income generating or otherwise.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. So no, I don't think the indoor sports facility is ever expected to be a profit-making venture. So just to be clear, the only thing on this page that there's nothing that isn't happening, but the only thing that needs to be funded with this, in year one of this next long-term plan, is that social needs assessment.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's right. That's absolutely right. So the last one, which we haven't talked about, is the multi-purpose all-of-government centre. So council has an advocacy role and will continue to advocate, work with central government, so the discussions are ongoing.
Yeah, and I just do want to note there's activity already underway through the Economic Development Kotahi Dunga Board. So we have been talking to a couple of central government agencies who are interested in coming out here. Also, under some of the work that's happening in Otaki, we're also looking at whether there might be an opportunity for central government to, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but co-fund some of the things that we'd like to do in that space as a kind of trial project. So it is early discussions, but just to say that activity is actually already underway.
Next slide.
Sorry, I'll stop with the question soon. Take an initiative along those lines. Say Maryland, for instance, and James Cameron, who's going to become a New Zealand citizen next year, and has got trifillions, and we want to encourage him to grow Maryland with his squillions. Where does council fit in that? Because sometimes what happens is we're looking to initiate a marriage between two parties that aren't us. Do you know what I mean? But it's important that we do that. So is that the sort of thing that we would be facilitating, but at no cost?
Yep. So the strategic development area in my group works with people on that already. I just think Kathy just mentioned before, or might have been you, Nigel, around Ian Castle's legacy indoor sports facility. We are actually involved in the discussions around that. So, and wider parts of the organisation. So we do that now.
Is everybody happy with the approach on that page? Yeah. Cool.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. So slide number 9, Community Board initiatives. So these were the initiatives that were tabled by the community boards. As you can see, there were initiatives that had majority support. There were some that were endorsed without majority support, and then there was stuff that didn't have support at all. So we've applied the same approach. We're only providing comment and recommendation on those issues or those initiatives that had the majority support. So earlier, the funding for Te Ara Koroai was asked where it was. So it's still on the slide, but it's not. We're not specifically providing comment on that.
Yeah, turn your microphone. Yep.
Yeah, seeing as you've raised that, I'll just ask my question. Thank you. When Te Ara Koroai went on the list, yep, people probably saw it for the first time. We've since had a presentation from Te Ara Koroai,
Yep.
and I just wonder whether that presentation may have kind of increased people's interest and support for that project. Is there some way we can test that? Show of hands.
Sorry, I would call for a show of hands from the chair. We're not in a Ramati Community Board
pushing my
meeting
luck,
now,
pushing my
Mr.
luck. Come on.
Larissy.
I'll give it a go. Fair call. Fair call. Yeah. I'll leave it in your hands, Madam Mayor.
So I think that falls into a similar category to the Citizens Advice Bureau. Firstly, they can submit into the process, as Cheryl kindly reminded us. And secondly, we could consider that when we have a look at our social investment program, which is going to happen quite shortly. I'm not sure if we've funded them through that before, but yeah.
Can I just briefly make a comment?
Yeah,
as well? There was some real standout things in the Te Ara Koroai presentation around how they are really not managing their funding sources properly. And I think they are an organisation that, well, certainly I could put them in touch with some people to help them solve that problem. I don't think it's a council problem. I think there's an issue within the organisation around how they're going about setting up sustainable funding sources and applying for funds from a variety of sources rather than being reliant on one primary funder for their ongoing operation. So
Yeah.
I think it's, you know, I'm certainly happy to
Taking that
feed-
point and turning it into a kind of more general point around our social investment funding, maybe our team can take that on and when we come back with our social investment program, that can be part of that piece of work, is how we support some kind of more robust way of saying how we support and how we can improve how we support these organisations. Because I know we do, and I hear that we do, and people say they've been to workshops, but I think it's something that we kind of need to commit to and put a structure around so that we just make sure that we're doing all we can, because I do agree with you, Liz.
It's about helping to make them sustainable in their own right, as opposed to coming to council for money all the time. And yeah, so I think that's where we need to put the focus, and I think we do need to review our whole policy on the social investment fund. We have talked about that, if you remember, about getting some help from the likes of Nico Foundation or whatever to help us in that space to be doing our grant making a lot better than what we've been doing in the past.
Oh, we
and
reviewed the whole
enabling-
thing exhaustively, but some years ago, so it probably needs to be refreshed.
Yes.
And
yeah.
times have changed since
Yeah.
then as well. And so I
Yeah.
just think I'm going to park this conversation for now, but I think it's a useful one to have at this point, because just because we're not saying that we're going to fund things through the long-term plan, it's not
mean
to
we're not gonna
say
help them.
we're not going to do it, we're not going to support it, we're not going to advocate for it, and we're not going to help deliver it. So
Yeah, we can certainly help them and support them, but there's
I think it's a
different
useful
way
reminder
of-
to have.
Yeah.
So I'll move on now to Shelley.
Mine's around the same thing. This is only one group of many that provide support, and if we fund one, we're going to have to fund the others. So we're not
We
the,
we
we're
need a
not the health
consistent
department.
approach. Yeah. And we can also encourage different organisations to work together too, which we've done before. Okay, who's next?
I mean, I guess the
John.
big question is we are in a shifting environment and there are going to be increasing numbers of Te Ara Korowais who are going to find themselves in a similar situation where their funding runs out in the middle of next year. So increasingly that burden is probably going to come to local councils, so it's going to be decision-making time. I think Liz is right. I think there's the idea that we can facilitate that by getting, funding application experts or whatever it is. I think that would be part of it. The problem with the community board initiatives as they sit up there is that the whole thing kind of smacked of parochialism, which is completely understandable. But I also wonder, it's an interesting initiative to don't invest in something, like Aotearoa Park, for instance. But so initiatives for development endorsed but not majority support. So take the development of the Waikanae Park, for instance. Now Mike might be able to correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that that's actually happening. So is this a suggestion that we would stop doing that, or because we're already doing it? Is that right?
I don't understand the question. Do you, Mike?
People from Waikanae understand it.
So yes, we are already doing that piece of work, Councillor, as you know, we're well advanced. So I don't think we're suggesting that we would stop doing that. We can't, in fact. So there's $500,000 this year and $500,000 next year. So yeah, it's happening.
Yeah, that's what I figured. There will be some of these things that don't appear to have support, but they're actually happening already anyway. Like Aotearoa Park, I think council upstairs has already made a decision to not be spending money on that. But
It's come down here.
yeah, but the bit about selling it or using the land for commercial development, I don't think that's the decision that's been made upstairs. But that's because this is a feedback thing. So I'm not sure that council per se has discussed whether or not Aotearoa Park should be sold to developers. But as an initiative, it's an interesting one, isn't it?
Okay, I'm going to go to Chris
Yeah.
because she already wanted to make a comment and maybe she can clarify some stuff around that. as
Okay,
well.
I think I just want to say we have some work underway through things like the health strategy. As we're looking at some of our ecosystems, I do want to say that we're trying to see who is involved in our ecosystem and Kapiti and what help and support we need. So that, for example, using health as somebody who does fund many providers, we're able to articulate to them some of the challenges we're having in our space, including the sustainability of contracts. And many of you who are involved in places like KYS know how tricky some of this is. So we're also wanting to be able to engage and say, how do we make it a bit simpler? We'll offer ourselves up as a pilot zone for them, but we've got that work underway. So some of this it's not a specific line in the LTP, but it doesn't mean, as you said, Nigel, that we're not actually doing something around it. And I just do want to note Aotearoa Park, I think you hit the nail on the head. Obviously, we've not brought anything to you to say that we're divesting it, but it was an option on the table, and it is an item that we're going to talk about in some detail shortly. But anything you see here, if we haven't come and talked to you, there's not work underway that you don't know about. So we are coming back.
Okay, apparently Aotearoa Park's coming up.
Yeah.
So, news to me. So, where are we up to?
We are going to now. We're on the detail behind the community board initiatives that had the majority support.
So,
Slide.
So is it clear what's happening to
10.
these ones on the previous slide? Sorry, before we go on, I just want to make sure we're covering everything off properly now because we're reaching the pointy end.
So there's
So the Trails Trust, that's
Coming up.
coming up.
The all the
All
ones
of this
in red.
is coming up.
All the ones
Great.
in red are
So what's happening to the ones in black?
nothing.
So the ones in black are now off the table. Are we getting any more detail around, for
No.
instance, Waikanae Beach Hall?
Waikanae Beach Hall, yes, because that was an other query raised by councillors, which is in the presentation. So again,
Okay, so I just think we need to draw a line under things a little bit today. So I think it's worth spending the time. So the Wainui Whenua projects, what's going on there? Nothing?
No, I can comment on that. Wainui Whenua, we are doing work, but there's a timing issue around that, and that we're working with GW and our Mana Whenua partners. We will be coming back to you with more information on that. I can confirm that Greater Wellington is not putting it in their LTP as an
So it's not
item,
immediate.
so we're not doing that either, but we are continuing to do work on it, and that's been managed within budget.
Great. The Develop Waikanae Park, that's off the table. Sorry, can I just go through this list and then we'll have some questions? Develop Waikanae Park, is that off the table? It's being done already? The beach hall we're going to talk about more?
yes.
Whale Song, Cornerstone Investor 3 million. I think we're all agreed that that's beyond our current capability. Te Ara Korowai, we've talked about our general social needs assessment and our support for social service organisations. Urban Design Panel for Otaki to guide development to support growth.
I just want to note that, Rob, we're working on, and Martin, we are working on the Urban Design Panel. Advice is coming back to you next year. It was one of the recommendations of PC2. We are not proposing to put a line item of funding in at this stage because we need to work out what it is, and we haven't done that yet. So we're kind of in that feasibility stage, and as we get going, we can work out what that looks like and what's required.
Cool. Okay, so Jocelyn, you were trying to say something, and I just wanted to get to the end of that list. So I was being obsessive.
Thank you. I've actually had my light up for a long time. I just wanted to ask, in relation to Waikanae Park, so that the work that is being done now is part of the destination park?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so when we put our light on, when there's a gap or when we reach that point, then we'll come to people. It's not necessarily immediate. Shelley, you've got your light on? Have you had it on for quite a while?
Doesn't want to go red. In the Trails Trust to manage CWB network, the recruitment process for CWB advisor resource, there's no time on that. Is that for 1 to 2 years or 1 to 3 years? I know that you've been recommended that this will help to stand up the Trails Trust so that hopefully we don't have the costs in the OPEX and CAPEX in the future.
Okay, I'm going to Mike for this one. Have we skipped ahead? Okay, so we were just talking about, so I was just going through the ones in black on that page 9 just to cover them off. Now we'll move, so we haven't quite got to that, Shelley. We're going to try and do it in order. So now we're on the next slide where we'll go through these in detail, and the Trails Trust is number 3. So let's go to solar generation just so we don't get lost. Sorry, Shelley.
So, thank you, Your Worship. So in terms of solar generation, solar farm, renewable energy generation, which is combining multiple initiatives, this is part of a program to reduce the emissions, and it's also an economic development opportunity. So in terms of the draft long-term plan, we've got $690,000 included in the CAPEX, Capital Works program, of the draft LTP. Now that's for Solar Civic, so that's looking at ways in which we can power this building using solar panels. In terms of the solar farm and much bigger initiatives, again, we don't have the information, so we haven't put a placeholder in the CAPEX. That's another opportunity to be further developed, further worked up, further discussed, maybe consulted on, but it would be put into either an additional future annual plan or long-term plan.
Okay, do we have any comments around solar generation? Bernie.
Yeah, but Mike, I've had it up on a different matter, but I'll raise it now. The Otaroa Park, and it's probably addressed to Mark. Mark,
So
I
that's,
do-
that's next, Bernie.
okay.
It's very next one on the list.
As
So
long as
just hold that just for one moment. I'm just trying to keep track of things. So we're on solar generation, solar farm, renewable energy on page 10 of the
Yeah.
slide deck.
I just wondered why we couldn't, again with this one, have some sort of feasibility study looked at, because if we're looking at additional revenue opportunities, potentially that is one. Doing it as a commercial venture. So could we have a feasibility study to look at that as a business opportunity?
The chief executive.
Thank you. Yep, it's all done. Predates me. Sean's done the piece of work. It's a really good piece of work. Rudimentally, it can save half of our power bill. And so I'm really keen to push this. So we've got this, there's more to come. There's probably a bit more work. It's about saving half of the power consumption and generating it from renewable. Just for council. Yep, just for council operations. Yep, we're not looking at that at the minute. I'm looking at how I can reduce the operating cost of our business. That's really my priority for now. Longer term, it might be something that we want to consider.
Was that what you were suggesting, a feasibility
Yeah.
study for?
Yep.
Can we
Yeah.
put that on the list of suggestions? Because I think we'd be really keen.
Sorry,
Hang on that.
can I just add that I'm fairly certain, almost wanting to put my hand on my heart, that the Economic Development Kotahitanga Board had that on a list of things that they were looking at, and I can come back and see if they'd actually done or completed a feasibility study on it. They were looking at some work in Otaki around that, but I'll come back. No, not recently. When I first arrived, they had been talking about it. But if it exists, I can circulate it around. If it doesn't, I'll close the loop.
Yeah, thanks for flagging that. I think that's it'll also help with our target that we set today, won't it? Glenn?
No, I think I've answered my own question. So if this is going to be consulted on, the solar part.
Yeah, or,
Yep.
yeah, everything will be consulted on. Yeah. Martin? So no, but it goes in the draft. We're not consulting whether or not to do it. It's not one of our items for consultation. It's in our draft, but people can always still feed back on it. Is that right, Mike?
So I think, just a point of clarification, so the 690K that's in the CapEx budget is for Solar Civic, nothing to do with the farm. Later on in the presentation, we will have a discussion about what we should consult on, but it's the solar farm is not it hasn't been identified as a consultation topic, but that may well come out of that discussion, but that's just for Solar Civic.
That answer your question, Glenn? So Glenn's still going. Can we have Glenn back? Thank you.
Yeah, so if we decide to move forward on it at a later date, would it meet because it would meet the significant engagement? Yeah, so would that project, do you think, trip that or not? Probably wouldn't, would it? Okay, yeah, thanks.
Martin?
Mine's actually a slide back around well, so it's just a quick touch base more than anything else because it wasn't really
I
discussed.
wondered if you were going to want to go back there. So, yep, okay,
Yep.
let's go back with the slide and
Yep.
we'll cover that off.
I'll be quick on it. Look, I'm assuming that we'll just step up in the area of support with regards to Kaupapa, what's going on there. We had the meeting yesterday and be working more on that field. I knew it was a bit of a long plug with regards to things, but we'll be assisting them with things like funding applications and that sort of scenario. That'd be a fair call.
Yes, and I think we touched base on that this morning with the economic development strategy or the direction of travel. Definitely still supporting them. At the moment, we're working with them on an application into MB and getting some traction. So it was more, it's not a line in our LTP, but we're still supporting them.
Yep, okay, that's cool. I'm happy with that.
Okay. Can I ask my question on Otaroa Park, Madam Chair?
We're not there yet, Benny.
You're not there yet?
I'll let you know. We're just talking about solar farms still. We just went backwards to talk about whale song. So I'm keeping track, don't worry. you press your button, please, Bernie? Who's next? Sophie. We need Sophie up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the 690 CapEx for Solar Civic, that's great to see that included, but keen to support the feasibility of the wider picture, because that's something that also has been talked about a lot, is how we can not only ensure that we're generating more renewable energy, but also that we're using it as an economic development opportunity. And the think tank, I'm sure, would love to get amongst that. So if there is some sort of feasibility work done, now seems like the prime time to do that, because the think tank can then be engaged in it, and it potentially saves council some resource. There are people who are really keen to contribute their thoughts and expertise into it. So if we do it now, then we can use the people that we have around the table to help us with it. So I would just, put a plug in for doing that ASAP.
Brilliant. Yeah. Jocelyn.
Thank you. So I was actually going to make exactly the same comment as Sophie did, and I suppose it's probably maybe extending it slightly a little. So you've got solar generation, you've got other forms of renewable energy, and maybe it's assessing which is the best form for our needs here. So I think, we've talked about strategic planning and, potential PGF type funding coming up now that we've got a new government, and it's about planning for this now rather than having 6 weeks to plan it and then put it into an application. So it's about identifying items such as this that we need to put money aside for, to plan for when the situation arises. So that's my first point on that. The second point is, it's great that this building is potentially going to save half its power bill. I think, like Liz said, it would be great to look at other buildings, and particularly the swimming pools, and particularly our swimming pool over there, where the air conditioning has to get rid of the heat that has been generated there, and using heat exchangers through some of the work that Energise Kapiti do, Energise Otaki do, they can quite easily design a system that actually saves a heck more money again as well. So I think some seed money or something in this space, I think would save a lot of money in the long term and reduce our carbon footprint.
Okay, we spent quite a lot of time on solar. Do you have anything different to add, Nigel? Good points, Jocelyn.
Otaki seems like it's something called Paki Otaki for nothing, I would have thought, following on from what Liz was saying, there's a whole bunch of development projects, but I wondered, I know when I was at GW, put in solar panels to drive the water treatment plant. And so any of those, I wonder also, I'm not sure if Solar Civic refers to the Civic, just this building, or other Civic.
Other ones as well.
Yeah, but yes, so I would have thought there's anything that council itself has that uses quite a bit of energy, that this is a possibility. But yeah, I agree with Liz. So that 690 CapEx for here presumably isn't going to be so exclusive that we can't use the modelling that comes from that for other developments.
I think
this
the
area.
message that's come through quite loud and clear today is we're very keen on solar and doing as much of it as we possibly can, as soon as we can. Would that kind of sum up the conversation?
Sells the sunny message of
Be
who we
music
are.
to Darren's ears, I'm sure. Sean wants to comment.
I was just to say we can travel through time and provide you with the feasibility report that Darren mentioned that's already looked at Otaki, looked at the Aquatic Centre, looked at solar farm
That'll be really
options.
great. Yeah.
That was the basis for our emissions reduction work program. So
And the think tank would probably like to see it too. Yep. Okay, Bernie, you're up. We've moved on to Aotearoa Park.
Yeah, thank you. It's just clarification, and through Mark, perhaps you can answer to me. Community Board initiative recommendations. I'm not aware of our Community Board ever discussing the Aotearoa Park divestment. That's the first question. And the second one just relates to, gosh, the last triennium, we spent ages and ages on it, and now we're recommending it to, I'm not disagreeing, but we're recommending it to be divested. So it's got community board initiative. What, how can we defend it? I mean,
Hi. So at the session for community boards where people put their ideas down, I'm not going to say that a community board or your community board put that idea down, but in that session that idea was put on the table and it was voted on, and it did come through as a possible from that session revenue generation idea. What I think is important in the comments of this item is it isn't, well, we're not proposing to support that idea from an operational perspective because it's really hard to divest of a reserve such as this. So I just want to say, we've said that progressing this is not funded in the draft LTP. It could be a potential addition if you do want to take it forward. We haven't said that there's been a decision to divest of that. That's not what operational staff are doing. We're just putting it back on the table to say this did come through. The idea, I think, was more broadly, could we look at our broader land ownership and pick some areas that we could divest of. So at the moment, that was the one that had been put on the table. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, so let's be really clear. This was an idea that came from a community board workshop. We don't know which community board it came from. It might not have even been Parapurumu. It sounds like it probably wasn't. And we are not taking this any further. They're not working on it upstairs. I don't think we're supporting it at this point in this meeting either. So I just, before the horse bolts and the rumour mill starts and the narrative gets away on us, we are not, we have no other plans for Otarawa Park except that it's a reserve at the moment and has a park management plan which still sits there, and I don't want to see this on any other lists. Okay? That's gone. And if it's potential addition to future annual plan, let's talk about it then. This is off the list. Okay, Bernie? It's off the list right now.
I presume, and that community board initiative recommendation makes it look like our community board has recommended this.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from, Bernie. I was wondering, I wondered that same thing.
Using
Yep.
to a member of the public.
Okay. So Bernie has made it very clear today that this was not a recommendation that came through the community board in any kind of formal way, and I see a guy nodding his head as well. So I think that's really clear. The fact that it's still sitting on the screen is making me uncomfortable, so can we get to the end of the slide as quickly as possible? Shelley, Trails Trust to manage CWB network.
Oh, I was going to talk about Otarawa Park though too. So at some point, after the long-term plan maybe, or next year, are we going to have a conversation around that? Because we have decided not to progress stuff at this
I think
stage.
there are lots of conversations that need to happen about Otarawa Park, but we're not going to have them right now because we're not doing anything through the LTP, and this is an LTP discussion.
Okay.
Okay, is that all right? Can we park it? We've really got to get on. Trails Trust, you've got the microphone.
So the CWB advisor resource, there's no time frame on that. So we have sent stuff to recommend a 3-year period to stand up that Trails Trust and manage it. And so now too has the CWB advisory group sent a letter of recommendation for that 3-year period. So is there going to be and hopefully then we don't have to spend all that OPEX and CAPEX because we'll have miles of money coming in. But are we going to have a time frame on that advisor resource guaranteed within our long-term plan?
So I'm going to comment on that if I may first, Mike, and then I'll pass to you. It is not our job to identify roles in the organisation that we want to create or fill. That is not our job. Our job is to say we want a particular piece of work done, or we want to go in a particular strategic direction. How that occurs and how that's delivered is not our job. That's up to staff and the managers to decide. And with that, I'll pass to Mike.
So would you like me to answer the question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. So if it gives you some comfort, Councillor, we are currently gathering the material for an advertisement for that role, and it's our intention to advertise actually this year to get the advert out before Christmas in the next couple of weeks. So we hope to make an appointment in the new year. I'll just make the point, though, this is a CWB advisor. We'll work very closely with a colleague in Sean's area and a colleague in Chris's area. We are joined at the hip on CWB internally.
That's great news. But I think it's still worth pointing out because I was concerned when I saw the suggestion come through. I think we need to be really careful about how we suggest things and very clear about what our role is.
Can I
So
just-
Shelley,
can-
do you want to go back
so
to you?
it's- I'm not trying to give advice on that. It's more the time frame. It's over the long-term plan. So, is it can we not give kind of recommendation that it would be for a period of time? Nope.
Well, I don't think that's an LTP discussion. Really? Jocelyn?
So one's more of a comment to do with Aotearoa Park. So
Yeah, we are commenting. That's completely fine.
So on the 7th of November, there was a report that came to the Climate and Environment Subcommittee meeting, which said that was placing the project on hold in the time being. And that same presentation there, it says that there was $5.9 million allocated in the long-term plan for this project. So if that project is only being put on hold, then one assumes that the money is not being removed, it's just being ring-fenced, or what is some clarity on that, please?
Can I go to Mike for that?
So this is capital expenditure. So it's not that the money's ring fence. It just means that we don't have to borrow the money to pay for that capital investment. And actually, when we come onto our capex profile later in the presentation, Mark might be able to kind of explain where that fits in.
So is it actually a line item in the long-term plan going forward?
No, I don't believe it is. No, in the draft LTP. Yeah. No, it is not. But we'll come to that later on in the presentation.
Second question relates to the Trails Trust up there. So it's great to see that some more money has been allocated in this area. What is the time frame to set up the trust? Because that to me is key to moving this whole area forward.
So it's our intention to move ahead with that in 24-25. We do have a meeting of key people from the CWB advisory group and key officers immediately after Christmas, councillor. So it's our intention to move ahead with that at pace, but without doing it at breakneck speed, because there are a few things to think through before we actually establish that trust.
Good. Glenn.
Just on the Trails Trust, I may have missed something along the way. My bad. That 300,000 a year in OPEX, is that for employing people? What's actually that money actually going to? Seems like a lot.
Do you want to do it?
Seems like a lot of OPEX.
Yeah, it covers all of the maintenance. It covers the maintenance of our existing network as well as additional funding to establish and work through the trust. So it isn't just for that purpose. So it's spread across the entire network.
That's good clarification to have. Rob?
Oh, thanks, Madam Chair. Just a question, Sean, I think you might be able to answer this. Just the access into the Old Taki Forks around the Blue Bluffs slip there. I believe
It's coming.
councils.
Is it?
Is that?
Yeah, that's coming up
Is it
later.
appropriate to do it now? Or
No.
Not CWB? Okay. Thanks. And just
won't
Nigel's
forget,
comment
don't worry.
about the Ian Castle's gymnasium. be really good to have that, and be really extra good to have Sir Noel Robinson's event centre at Papram Airport 20 years ago. Thanks.
My point's similar to Glenn's. We're talking about the OPEX budget of 3.3, and I'm just looking at the CAPEX budget of 15.5. Again, it would be 1.5 million over a year, over 10 years, but it's quite often these things are front end loaded. So is that the case? I mean, it's the same like with the 3.3 million. If 3 of it was being spent in the first year, and then the 0.3 spread, or as the same with the 15.5 million. So is that, yeah? So what's the loading? What's the loading of that? Because there's a immediate rating impact if you chuck it all at the front end, and there's not so much of a rating impact at all if it's all in year 9 and 10, right? Which is quite often how things work. So just wondering about that.
So no, it's pretty evenly phased. 3.3 spread across 10 years. Yes. Yep.
Cool. How are people feeling about this slide? Everybody feel comfortable that they have all the information they need, and we've given some useful future direction too? Cool. Okay, we're going to take a short break. I'm just checking in because I don't know how other people are feeling, but okay, so it'd be really good if we could be back in 10 minutes sharp so that we can get the next little bit done.